Hello everyone, and welcome back to Legends of the Jedi. After our last episode, I was on an unscheduled holiday hiatus, but now I'm back and fully recovered from my carbonite sickness. In the immortal words of Han Solo, everything's under control, situation normal. Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly alright now. We're fine, we're all fine here, now. Thank you. How are you? Right then, recap time. In our last episode, we delved into a new story arc in the Tales of the Jedi. We covered issues 1 to 3 of the Dark Lords of the Sith. We were introduced to Exar Kun, Jedi archaeologist and student of Master Vodo Sios Bas. We followed him down his dark path as he ventured to the planet Korriban. In his quest to acquire forbidden knowledge, Kun plumbed the depths of the Sith tombs. Eventually cut off from the light side of the Force, he was forced to call on the dark side to survive on that savage world. We also talked about the rise of the Krath. This group was originally a secret society formed by Satal Keto and his cousin Alima. Using the dark side of the Force, they staged a coup in the Empress Teta system, which brought them into direct confrontation with the Jedi Order. As the Jedi gathered to debate the best way forward, their conclave was attacked by assassin droids sent by the Krath. Master Arkajeth, the former master of Ulic and Kay Keldroma, was unexpectedly struck down in this attack. Our first 3 issues end with Ulic vowing to destroy the Krath. Despite protests from his friend and companion Nomi Sunrider, Ulic tells her that he intends to join the Krath and bring them down. From within. In today's episode, we'll be covering issues 4 to 6 of the Dark Lord's arc, so put on your Beskar armor and join me as we jetpack straight into issue 4 entitled Death of a Dark Jedi. The issue opens with Exar Kun vaulting across hyperspace in his ship, the Starstorm 1. We're told he has left Korriban, and that he's following the trail of the long-dead Sith magician Nagasato. Kun's search brings him to an obscure moon, one of dozens orbiting a gas giant called Yavin. As Kun's ship descends toward Yavin 4, we see that his arrival is noticed by the Massassi. These warriors stand eternal watch over the temples built by their ancestors. But let's get one thing straight. These aren't your grandparents' Massassi. They are much more savage and primitive looking than the original Massassi warriors Nagasato brought with him 1,000 years earlier. If you're interested in learning more about that story, I encourage you to check out episode 5 of the podcast, detailing the fall of the Sith Empire. So in the past 1,000 years, the temples of Yavin 4 have fallen into disrepair. We're told they give off a similar vibe to the tombs of Korriban. When Exar Kun departs from his ship, he hears the voice of Freedon Nad, beckoning him forth with the promise of great power locked away in the ruined temples. Again, though, we see that Kun has not fully committed to his new dark path. He tells Nad that he doesn't want his help. Ignoring this, Nad tells him to beware of the Massassi, whom he describes as the mutated descendants of the ancient Sith. They are offspring of Nagasato's Sith alchemy, which made them into powerful beings filled with violence. They were made to forever stand guard over Sato's legacy. Again, Kun basically tells the ghost to get lost and return to the tomb that Arka built for him. As he ventures forth, Exar Kun can sense life forms closing in on him. These beings are savage. They lack the intelligence and civility of their Sith forebears. And to make matters worse, they can use the dark side of the Force to guide and control their primitive weapons. They attack with weapons that essentially look like a halberd or a spear with a disc at the end. With the swing of their weapons, they launch these deadly discs directly at Exar Kun. The fallen Jedi archaeologist calls on the light side of the Force to shield him from their projectiles, but again, just like on Korriban, he finds himself cut off. More Massassi emerge from the jungle and begin to swarm over his ship, the Starstorm 1, and they start stripping it of its components. Fleeing further into the jungle, Kun is confronted by a large Massassi, and with a swift blow, he is knocked unconscious. The Massassi bring the prone Exar Kun to their temple priest. Now this guy is a Massassi covered in elaborate jewels, and we're told that his name is Zythmnr. We're also told that the priest has just emerged from 12 years of solitude. In the Massassi tongue, which is helpfully translated for us, Zythmnr tells the Massassi that Kun is the one they have waited for. He instructs them to bring him to the Temple of Fire. Now the ghost of Freedon Nad is watching all of this from a distance, and he sees the Massassi drag the fallen Jedi to a large temple complex. Here's what he says. "The fool. I have given him everything, and he still pretends nothing has changed. I made certain his seduction was complete.
Exar Kun will use the dark side. That is his true power now.
So at this point, the scene changes to the Great Jedi Library on the planet of Ossus. An ancient Jedi Master named Ood Bnar hands a large tome over to Ulic Qel-Droma. He tells him that it's the definitive history of the Empress Teta system. Ulic thanks him, and he says that when he infiltrates the Krath, he wants to know everything there is to know about the people he'll be dealing with. Master Ood assures him that the book should help. He reveals that it was written by the old warrior Empress Teta herself, in her 175th year no less. As a side note, it's really nice to see that she lived a long life. So we see that Nomi Sunrider is with Ulic, and she tells him that her master thinks that he's making a terrible mistake by trying to conquer the dark side from within. Ulic brushes the concern aside. He tells her that Master Thawne is wrong. What he intends to do is difficult, sure, but any Jedi who runs away from the opportunity to battle the dark side is no better than a rank coward. At this point, Master Ood pipes in.
Strong words, my son, for one who is neither old nor wise. Before you go, I'd like you to meet one of the oldest and wisest. He has something to show you. His name is Master Ood Bnar.
Ulic is brought before the ancient Ood Bnar, over 1,000 years old, for those of you who are keeping count. He greets Ulic and Nomi, identifying himself as the Keeper of Antiquities. He shows them a rare Sith holocron. Now, if you remember, from our very first episode, Sith holocrons are pyramid-shaped, unlike Jedi holocrons, which are typically cube-shaped. The holocron recounts a story of a Jedi who chose to learn the ways of the dark side. Like Ulic, he believed that the dark side could be conquered from within. Such was not to be. The dark side seduced him entirely, and anger became his faith. In the end, he turned against his own master and struck him down. Ulic is absolutely stunned by the images before him, and the very idea of a Jedi Knight murdering his own teacher sickens him. He asks why Ood Bnar showed him this story in the first place. This is what he says.
Is this how you demonstrate your disapproval of my choice? I need your understanding, not your disapproval. Because of my failure, my master died at the hands of the evil Krath. Arca was a very great Jedi. If such amateur magicians could kill him, what will they do to the rest of us? What will they do to you?
At this point, Nomi interjects. Ulic, Master Ood Bnar means to warn you about the dark side of the Force.
Come on, Nomi, can't you see? Someone has to prevent this evil from infecting the galaxy as it did in ancient times. These masters, they prefer to do nothing.
Master Ood observes that Ulic is determined and that he won't be swayed. He tells him that the masters have offered their wisdom, and now the rest is basically up to him. As they depart, Ood Bnar delivers the classic, "May the Force be with you." Outside of the library, Nomi and Ulic are still arguing about his chosen course of action. Ulic complains to her that the Jedi have become complacent since the defeat of the Sith over 1,000 years ago. Eventually they're confronted by Ulic's brother Kay, who asks whether Ulic is still planning that crazy trip to the Empress Teta system. Nomi leaves the two brothers alone to go find her daughter Vima. Now that they're alone, Kay tells Ulic in a rather touching moment that he wants to go with them. They're brothers, and he wants to fight alongside him. Ulic is adamant, however, that he must go alone. He needs to learn the Sith magic of the Krath and find some way to neutralize it. Kay shares that he has a bad feeling about it, and when someone in the Star Wars universe has a bad feeling about something, you really want to listen to them. Kay wants Ulic to call off the mission, but his brother's mind is made up, and he intends to leave at dawn. Kay then tells Ulic that he fears he'll never see him again. Ulic embraces him in a tight hug and tells him not to worry, they'll be joking about this in a few months' time. After a night of study, Ulic prepares to depart in a smuggling freighter called the Kestral Nova. This ship was captured in a battle with space pirates near Tanab. He explains to Nomi that he plans to pass himself off as a smuggler in order to gain access to the city of Sinagar. Now, if you remember, that's the capital city of Koros Major in the Empress Teta system. Nomi even offers to come visit Ulic in Sinagar. But he reiterates, and he tells her the same thing that he told Kay, not to follow him. Ulic embraces Nomi and kisses her deeply. We're told it's a goodbye kiss that becomes something more. In the next panel, Nomi can be seen clutching Vima to her chest, watching as Ulic's ship departs into space. There's tears streaming down her cheeks. She's reminded of her deceased husband Ander, who was killed by the power of darkness. Now, just as Ulic began to fill that void in her heart, he may be lost to her as well. So back on Yavin 4, in the heart of the great Sith Temple of Fire, Exar Kun is strung up on a cross-like structure. I'm not even going to begin to attempt to unpack the symbolism behind that artistic choice. We're told he's the honored guest of a Massassi blood sacrifice. Khun is conscious once more, and he begins to feel the darkness welling out of the secret places of his heart. Tremendous energies are concentrated within these half-ruined temples. As the priest Zythmnr holds up an ancient Sith amulet, the energies begin to increase. Think Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. That whole Kalima scene, that's the kind of vibe, and that's what this looks like. Khun briefly wonders if this is the end for him, but then brushes the thought aside. He feels no fear at all. As the Massassi elders fall into a trance, torrential energy is released all around him. Khun breaks free of his bonds, but senses a presence, something ancient and evil. He remembers the words of Master Voto's holocron. Nagasato was a magician of pure Sith blood, who was in rebellion against the Sith rulers, those fallen Jedi who wore the title Dark Lords of the Sith. Sato was sentenced to die by the reigning Dark Lord. The magician and his followers hid on the fourth moon of Yavin, where he practices alchemy undisturbed. Now, a thing created by his alchemy has awakened. Okay, now that we've gotten that lore flashback from Master Voto, let's pause for a moment and reflect. So we know that Sato actually proclaimed himself to be the Dark Lord of the Sith. So this narrative is a bit confusing. That said, it's possible that whoever recounted this doesn't know the whole story. It's also possible that the Sith retconned their own history to distance themselves from Sato and the disaster he brought to the Empire. So when he failed to destroy the Republic, he had no choice but to flee to Yavin 4. I doubt the remnants of the Sith would have been much kinder to him if he had returned to the Empire proper. In the culmination of the ritual, a giant worm-like leviathan erupts from the ground in front of Exar Kun and rears its head towards him. Before we can see what happens, we flash to Sinagar, ruling city of the Empress Tita system. Under the reign of Satal and Alima, the city has become a wretched hive of persecution and dread. Ever since attacking the Jedi, the Krath have become increasingly vigilant. That means that Ulick's arrival in Sinagar is not as secret as he would have hoped. In one panel, we see a hooded Ulick stalking through the dark and rainy streets. In the next, Alima is looking out the window of her palace complex. She tells her cousin Satal that she can sense a Jedi and that he wants something from them. She finds the Jedi interesting and believes that he can teach them things. She convinces Satal to bide his time, as she believes the Jedi will eventually make a move. The next morning on Sinagar, Ulick Qel-Droma comes across a large crowd in the city's central plaza. We're told it's a public execution ceremony for carbonite traders who dared to defy the rule of the Krath. The public execution serves its purpose in signaling to the crowd that rebellion will not be tolerated under this regime. In the midst of the executions, rebellious assassins leap from the crowd yelling, "Death to the dark side tyrants!" The people's revolt is met head-on by Alima and her Titan warriors, but the odds don't look so good for the Krath. Ulick realizes that if Satal and Alima die now, the dark side secrets will not die with them. His plans to infiltrate their cult will come to nothing. The Sith malignancy will continue to fester and spread as it did in ancient times. So he decides to intervene and try to win the favor of the Krath. Impulsively, he ignites his lightsaber and leaps into the fray. Before the first strike, he hesitates. To strike someone down in cold blood like this means no turning back. He swings his lightsaber and kills one of the rebels poised to attack her. So what Ulick doesn't know is that Alima planned the entire thing, and he fell right into her web. Within moments, the rebels are quietly subdued. Alima turns to her savior. "Thank you, whoever you are. You have saved my life. I sense the Force is strong in you." Ulick says back, "I did what any Jedi would do." "Yes, I should have known. I have always admired the Jedi Knights." "Continue with the execution, Satal." With that, she turns her back on her cousin and ushers Ulick into the palace. Back on Yavin 4, Exar Kun is not faring so well against the giant dark side Leviathan. Frida Nad appears before him and tells him that the creature is death itself. He begs Kun to use the dark side of the Force to save himself. He tells him some story about how Sato hated the Dark Lords and feared Exar Kun's coming. This monster was apparently created by alchemy to destroy him. Nad tells Kun to focus his power through Zythmnr's Sith amulet. As the Leviathan binds the fallen Jedi, he begins to squeeze the life out of him. Kun realizes he has no choice but to let go of the Jedi way. He gives in to his rage, and he tells Nad that he hates him. Suddenly speaking in the Sith tongue, he uses the Force to snatch the amulet from the priest. As it goes soaring towards him, he begins to focus his energy. With a clash of iron, the amulet clamps itself to his arm, sort of like Infinity Gauntlet style. He suddenly feels his rage multiplied 1,000 times, and then 100,000 times. Exar Kun begins to shoot literal beams of dark side energy out of the amulet. These beams, fed by his rage, are like Kamehamehas for you Dragon Ball fans out there. As his rage continues to multiply, he loses control of the power, and the flesh of his hand begins to burn. With a mighty blast, he blows a hole right through the dark side Leviathan. The temple is in smoldering ruins from Kun's dark side blasts. He stands on top of the fallen monstrosity as the Massassi fall to their knees and begin to worship him. Although he bested Sato's dark side creation, Kun realizes that he was barely able to control the amulet. In fact, it almost consumed him. At that point, Nad appears behind Kun, congratulating him for winning over the Massassi. Then he reveals his endgame to the fallen Jedi. He wants him to find Sato's laboratory and begin alchemical work so that he, that being Freed Nad, can be reborn into a new body. This is what Kun says to him. Freed Nad, I've had quite enough of you guiding me, testing me. Nad says in response,
Nonsense. Let's get to work. I am hungry to reacquire flesh and life and power.
Kun turns away from the ghost and he smirks. Following his impulses and again focusing his anger, he turns the Sith amulet against Nad and strikes him with it. As Nad begins to die a second death, he reaches out to his other students across the galaxy. In the citadel of the Krath, Alima is in the midst of telling her cousin that the Jedi is named Ulic Qel-Droma, and that he claims to have fallen from the Jedi way. She thinks he could be a great asset to them, but Satao believes he is a spy, and he wants to kill him. Their argument is interrupted by the arrival of Freed Nad's apparition, who is in apparent death throes. He wants them to beware of Exar Kun, who has acquired great Sith powers and has ambition without limit. He declares Kun to be a pretender to the Sith legacy, and explains that Alima, Satao, and Ulic, yes, you heard him, Ulic, are the inheritors of the Sith legacy. With a final gasp, Nad's spirit surrenders to utter annihilation on Yavin 4. In the last panel of the issue, Exar Kun overlooks the destruction of the Sith spirit, all the while pondering the mysteries of the dark side of the Force. Issue 5 of this story arc is entitled Sith Secrets, and you're definitely going to want to check out the cover art by Hugh Fleming. It's a great picture of Nomi Sunrider in profile, wielding her green lightsaber. In the words of Emperor Palpatine, do it! So in the opening scroll of the issue, we're told that when Exar Kun gazed into the Sith amulet last issue, he saw a vision of himself as a great Dark Lord of the Sith. It was this vision that empowered him to turn on and obliterate the spirit of Freed Nad. The issue opens beneath the Iron Citadel of the Krath in Sinagar. A grisly scene is depicted, where the political enemies of the regime are strung up on stalactites and hanging off the ceiling. We're told this punishment assists with their, quote-unquote, political re-education. Satao and Alima are at it again, arguing about whether to keep or kill Ulic. Satao is convinced he's a spy, but Alima points out that Freed Nad said Sith power rests within him. Satao accuses Alima of wanting Ulic for her own foolish pleasure games. In return, Alima accuses her cousin of being jealous. When they reach the end of the walkway, we see a topless Ulic is also strung up and completely bound. A torture droid cheerfully informs him that his masters are pleased Ulic has decided to join the Krath, but the claims of his loyalty must be tested and verified. Satao walks up to Ulic and he asks him point blank whether he's a spy. A very exhausted Ulic tells him that he left the Jedi and he came to Sinagar to learn the ways of the dark side. Satao tells Ulic that he doesn't believe him. He takes out a thin blade and he points it at Ulic. Alima jumps in at this point. A Sith curse on you, Satao. If you kill him, I'll never forgive you. Satao tells her that Ulic doesn't have to die. If his Jedi powers are able to neutralize Sith poison, he'll be just fine. He pierces Ulic's abdomen and steps back. Ulic shrieks in pain, and he unleashes a force blast powerful enough to free him from his bonds, but he immediately collapses from the poison. Alima checks on him and verifies that he's still alive. She chastises Satao for almost killing him. She promises Ulic will become an ally of the Krath and that she'll find a way to use him to expand their power across the galaxy. As he begins to walk away, Satao waves his hands at her in disgust and tells her that she can have it her way. Back on Yavin 4, Exar Kun overlooks a great construction project. By lifting the curse of Nagasato, he has become the leader of the Massassi. They believe that this Jedi is the returned Dark Lord of the Sith, foretold in their legends. Khun doesn't really care about titles so much as he does about power in and of itself. He has ordered the Massassi to build temples according to ancient Sith designs. These temples are intended to focus great dark side energies. The Massassi are all too eager to please their new lord. With him as their leader, they believe that they will again become Sith, conquerors of worlds. For his part, Khun doesn't care what they believe, as long as they continue to obey. He returns to the site of his victory against the great dark side Leviathan. This old temple. The guardian creature was placed here to protect a great power. I can feel it. I can feel something more. Something ancient deep below. Exar Kun is determined to not only learn, but master the secrets of Sado's Sith alchemy. Let's take brief stock of his journey. So, he originally found Nad's tomb on the moon of Onderon, and then the ghost of Nad led him to the mausoleums on Korriban. From those mausoleums, he found his way to Yavin 4. Now, deep below the Temple of Fire on Yavin 4, he comes across an even greater discovery, Nagasado's warship, the very same spacecraft that brought him to Yavin 4 in the first place. Back in episode 5 of the podcast, I told you how Sado's warriors were constructing a temple around his ship. Well, now we can connect those dots. The ship is perfectly preserved. Exar Kun realizes that even though the Massassi destroyed Starstorm 1, he is no longer at risk of being stranded on the moon. Inside the ship, he finds a trove of equipment, the apparatus of Sith alchemy. Ever the scholar, Kun is deeply entranced by these discoveries. At this point, we flash to a spaceship in orbit around Koros Major, the Nebulon Ranger. Aboard are Nomi, Kay, and the Twi'lek Jedi Tot Danita. We find out that Nomi left her daughter in the care of Master Thawne. She gathered Kay and Tot in an attempt to bring Ulic back home. Despite Ulic's warnings not to follow him, none of the Jedi are able to feel him with the Force. Apparently, they fear that he might have died, and that has prompted Nomi and her companions into action. She tells her companions that she intends to contact Ulic in secret. If he's still alive, she wants to find out what he's learned about the craft without blowing his cover. Nomi takes an escape pod to the outskirts of Sinagar and sneaks her way into the city. She's not able to feel anything beyond the dark power that now inhabits the great iron citadel of the craft. Even though she can't feel him, Nomi realizes that if Ulic is alive, he must be in there. For lack of a better plan, she decides to reveal herself as a Jedi and get captured in order to gain access to the citadel. She ignites her lightsaber, which she still uses with some reluctance, and begins to attack a couple Krath warriors. A few more join the fray, and she is quickly surrounded. Despite her dire circumstances, we're told that Nomi could easily overwhelm her foes with her Jedi battle meditation. Instead, she allows herself to be captured. At that very moment, Ulic is instructing Satal and Alima in the art of modern warfare. He points out that their weapons are obsolete and will need to be upgraded in order to stand a chance against Republic and Jedi lasers. Alima suggests that they give Ulic command of the Krath armed forces. Satal doesn't like this idea. He alleges that Ulic will just hand them over to the Jedi if they do that. Satal then proceeds to tell everyone gathered that he's just received word a Jedi woman was captured in Sinagar. He accusingly asks Ulic whether this is the beginning of a Jedi invasion. Again, Ulic tells him that he came to Sinagar on his own volition. He asks who the Jedi woman is. As if on cue, Satal calls for the guards to bring her in. Nomi is flung down in front of Ulic and Satal. Ulic calls out to her, but he's instantly cut off with an "Aha!" from Satal. Satal is all like, "So you do know her." Ulic doesn't hide it. He tells everyone that she is a Jedi Knight. At that moment, he can feel the cousins reaching into his mind, trying to discern his true feelings for Nomi. In order to mask these feelings, Ulic allows his anger towards Nomi to burst forth. He asks her why she followed him when he warned her to stay away. Satal asks whether, as their new military commander, kind of mockingly, Ulic would be willing to carry out Nomi's execution. Instead, Ulic orders that she be taken to the dungeons for interrogation. Satal tells him it's too risky. He demands that Nomi is destroyed quickly. Ulic grapples with whether he will reveal his true intentions or maintain the facade. Ultimately, the choice seems obvious to him. He turns away from Nomi.
"Very well, Satal. I will execute her myself, tomorrow at dawn."
We're told that the accusation in the eyes of Nomi Sunrider is something that will stay with Ulic for the rest of his life, and it's not hard to believe. Ulic casts his eyes downwards as she's hauled away by the guards. Back on Yavin 4, we learn that Exar Kun has unearthed a trove of Sith alchemical lore left behind by the original Massassi and Nagasado. As a result of his journey to Korriban, he was instilled with the ability to read ancient Sith glyphs. Hunched over a bunch of ancient scrolls, he declares that he's found the process by which Sith magicians altered the form of living creatures. The legend speaks of a magical metamorphosis, an alchemy that can make a warrior into a god. Behind him, we see a Massassi struggling against his bonds. This is what Exar Kun says. "Fear not, Zythmnr. The scrolls say that the transformation is painless. The dark side of the Force will transform you into the greatest of all Massassi. You should be honored." We learn that the Massassi priest Zythmnr will be the first to receive the ancient empowerment. Sato believed that the natural order of the universe belonged to him. Using Sith alchemy, he sought to create armies of monstrosities, beasts of war, malformed servants of death, and now Exar Kun plans to do the same, all in the pursuit of power. As the focused power matrix begins to open, Zythmnr starts to transform into something more. Back on Sinagar, Ulic is carefully shielding his true feelings from Satal and Alima. Using a servant droid meant to bring prisoners their food, he records a message for Nomi. The message is basically telling her that he'll do everything he can to get her released, and that she needs to return to Ossus because he needs more time. After he finishes recording his message, Alima enters the room and begins to caress Ulic's face. He asks whether she has ever doubted his intent. Alima tells him straight up, while she believes he came there as a spy, now more interesting things occupy his time. She leans in for a kiss. Ulic sees Alima's desire as a means to an end, and that's made very clear to us. He intends to use her in order to conquer the dark side. But what Ulic doesn't know is that Satal has been watching him. He intercepts the servant droid's message, and after listening to it, he flies into a rage and destroys the droid with his blaster. Here's what he says. "As my cousin fawns over this Jedi fool, he prepares to destroy us, but I will destroy him." Satal turns to his trusted advisor, and he tells him to send 20 men to bring Nomi to him, for she is very powerful. He also sends the kill order for Ulic. Even if his cousin protests, he wants the guy dead. Deep in the Krath dungeons, Nomi tries to reach out with the Force. She finds that the dark side is too strong for her to sense Kay and Tot. She tries again to reach out to Ulic. Here's what she says. "Ulic, why can't I sense you? Have you really abandoned us? I can't believe that." Guards appear at her door and tell her it's time to come with them, but Nomi decides that it's actually time for her to leave. She reaches out with the Force and uses her Jedi battle meditation to form an image of the guards attacking each other. Like Arkanian dragons, the guards turn on each other with mortal violence. Nomi simply walks through the slaughter, plucking a comlink and a sword off of a dead guard. She is able to escape with ease as the guards continue to kill each other. Using her comlink, she tries to get a hold of Kay and Tot. Meanwhile, as the hour for execution draws near, we find Ulic putting his clothes back on while a naked Alima lies in bed. Ulic reflects on the fact that he doesn't feel quite like himself and wonders if this is the effect of Alima's power over him. Before he can think any further, an assassin sent by Satal crashes through the window and begins to shoot at Ulic with dual pistols. Ulic ignites his blue lightsaber and cuts the assassin down. Alima tells Ulic that the assassin worked for her cousin. She reveals it was Satal's idea to attack the Jedi on Deneba. And if you remember, the Jedi attack on Deneba took place in the last podcast episode. It was the same attack where Master Arca was killed. As this is happening, Nomi has found her way out of the Citadel. Alerted by her comlink message, the Nebulon Ranger comes swooping in over the streets of Sinagar. Kay and Tot disembark and make their way to Nomi. She points them to a tunnel that leads back into the Citadel. Her plan is to go back in, make her way to the royal chamber, and extract Ulic. Unfortunately for Nomi, word of her escape has reached Satal Keto. More guards come pouring through the tunnel. Standing on a balcony, Satal watches below as his guards engage the Jedi Knights in battle. In the midst of this battle, Kay tells his companions that he can sense Ulic is near. As if on cue, Ulic suddenly appears on the balcony with Satal Keto.
"Yes, Kay, I'm here, and this is the man who murdered Master Arca."
Gesturing at Satal, Ulic brings his lightsaber up and attacks. "Careful, Jedi. Didn't your master tell you that anger is not the way?"
"Some things cannot be forgiven. Some crimes deserve the justice of hatred."
As waves of anger wash over Ulic, he begins to feel the pain from the Sith poison that has been activated in his bloodstream. The ancient Sith were masters of alchemy. They understood how to multiply the chemistry of rage in a being's veins. Ulic refuses to submit to Satal, and he strikes him down in a savage overhead slash. In his last moments, a dying Satal tells Ulic that his anger has ignited the Sith poison within him. He croaks out an ominous,
You'll see.
Right before he dies. As the battle comes to an end, Kay and Todd approach Ulik and tell him to come home with them before a zillion more Krath enforcers show up. Ulik turns his back on them.
Get away from me, I swear. I'll kill you all.
Sensing something is wrong, Todd and Kay move in to try and take Ulik by force. Instead, he yells,
Get away!
And he unleashes a wave of dark side energy, knocking both of them back. Despite Nomi's protests, Kay and Todd know they're outmatched. They convince her to get back on the Nebulon Ranger and flee just as they begin to take fire from Sinagar's ground troops. The three young Jedi are heartsick for having to leave Ulik behind, but they realize there was no other choice. At this point in the story, you have to feel a bit sorry for Nomi. It's taken her a long time to give her heart to Ulik, and now she's been shattered by his betrayal and apparent madness. At that last moment when he attacked us, I felt something, Kay. Ulik is lost to us, I can feel it. I fear we'll never get him back. On the ground, Ulik watches them leave. He quietly asks his friends to forgive him, but of course they can't hear him. Now the prophecy that was told to him by Freeden Nad comes back in full force. Ulik realizes he's on a dark path from which there is no return. Issue 5 ends back on Yavin 4. Exar Kun has restored Nagasato's old ship to flight capability. Using the amulet, he was able to see the others that Freeden Nad contacted right before his death. These others, they too are using Sith power. That makes them a threat to my work. It is time to reach out to these fellow Sith students of Freeden Nad and destroy them. So, our story arc concludes in Issue 6, which is entitled Jedi Assault. The issue opens over the skies of Onderon. Jedi Knights Kay Keldroma and Dace Diath are testing out new experimental Starsaber attack ships against robot drones. As the two starfighters fly through the canyons near Khossa spaceport, it looks like things are going well. The ships are fast and the robot drones are dispatched with relative ease. As they continue their test flight, Dace fails to notice a giant rock formation straight ahead. Unable to maneuver around it in time, his ship slams into the rock and explodes. Luckily, Dace is able to avoid a fiery death and jumps from the starfighter moments before the explosion. He uses a form of force levitation to safely reach the ground. I guess those Jedi reflexes count for something. We learn that the two Jedi are training for a rescue mission. Hitching a ride in Kay's cockpit, Dace tells him that the Starsaber's control stick was acting pretty sluggish and they probably shouldn't use them for their mission to Sinagar. The two Jedi quickly return to base, where they are greeted by the other Jedi Knights we've come to know in this era. We see Nomi, we also see Os Wylam, Tot Donita, Kurl Tok, and last but not least, the Mira Lucan Jedi Shoaneb Kulu. They're also joined by Oron Kira, their Beast Lord ally from the planet Onderon. He and his Beast Riders have come to join their mission to Sinagar. As Dace and Kay approach the group, Oron is in the midst of telling the Jedi that each beast eats around 100 kilos of raw vegetable matter a day. Talk about an appetite. Dace informs the crowd of Jedi that the Starsabers still have a few bugs left in them. While they debate whether to use these fighters for their mission, Kay impatiently tells the others that they're all ready to go to Sinagar. You get the sense he wants to get his brother back as soon as possible. Before they can leave, the assembled Jedi Masters and Ossus would like a word with Kay and Nomi. Both are summoned to a meditation chamber where several Jedi Masters have gathered for a joint meditation session. Master Thon beckons them in and wastes no time questioning the wisdom of their course of action. Kay tells the assembled Masters that Ulik is in great danger. It's unclear how he knows, but he does know that the Sith poison courses through Ulik's bloodstream. Nomi agrees with Kay, but she acknowledges that the Sith evil has touched Ulik deeply. She wants to retrieve him before the Krath completely destroyed the man she once knew. Master Thon tells the Jedi that certain things are a matter of destiny and certain things are a matter of choice. He's of the view that Ulik needs to learn this lesson the hard way. Master Ood Bnar disagrees with this line of thinking. He points out that the Jedi can be seduced by the dark side. The rage that is unleashed within them drives them further from the light and destroys ordinary common sense. Master Vodo also chimes in at this point.
I have seen my own apprentice, Exar Kun, take the dark path. I have tried to help him, and will continue to do so. But every Jedi is a free Jedi, and it would be unwise to attempt to coerce anyone to hold on to the light against their will.
Kay tells the Masters that he can't let the Krath destroy his brother. Jedi have to help each other. That's how it's always been. Somewhat reluctantly, Thawne concedes the point, and he tells Kay that the Jedi Knights have their permission to mount their rescue mission. He warns them that if Ulic has chosen the dark side, he must remain free to experience the consequences of his choice. Such is the Jedi way. Master Voto agrees with this. Once the choice is made, the way is through, not back. Meanwhile, in the city of Sinagar, we discover that Exar Kun and several of his Massassi warriors have made their way to the Iron Citadel. Inside the fortress, Alima presents Ulic with a Sith amulet that has previously belonged to Sital. She's pretty sly about it, ever the temptress. She tells him perhaps it'll help him conquer the dark side, and perhaps even give him an advantage over her. We get the sense that Alima is playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse with Ulic. She knows he isn't fully turned, but she clearly enjoys the back and forth. Ulic points out that she takes a great risk by giving him this powerful talisman. Alima reveals that she's winning their contest too easily. Perhaps she wants him to be stronger. Perhaps she'd even like to be conquered. Hey, look, those are her words, not mine. Or I guess they're actually the words of Kevin J. Anderson and Tom Veitch, so please don't write me any hate mail. As the Sith amulet begins to glow in Ulic's hand, another one close by responds. It's the very same amulet that Exar Kun stole from the Massassi priest Zythmnr. We learn that the two amulets are linked. Kun tells himself that if these Darksiders have another amulet, they're clearly a threat, and he won't leave until they're dead. Before he can make his way into the Citadel, several ships suddenly appear in the skies over Sinagar. Exar Kun swiftly realizes he may not even need to do the fighting himself, as the attack force from Ossus emerges from hyperspace undetected. The Teton defenders are caught off guard by the Jedi attack force that sweeps into the forbidden inner city behind the Citadel walls. Os Wylam directs the Jedi starfighters to hit the main defense towers. Shoaneb Kulu, despite being blind, demonstrates her flawless skill with the stinger she pilots by destroying one of the defense towers with deadly and accurate aim. Ignoring Os Wylam's orders to stay with the assault force, Dace Diath peels off in a Starsaber to attack the gun emplacement protecting the palace. Although the controls are still sluggish, he manages to compensate for it with his Jedi senses and successfully destroys the palace defenses. Soon enough, the attack force reaches the royal palace, and Onderonian war beasts begin to spill out of the transport ship. Riding on two of these war beasts, Kay and Nomi fly towards the palace. We're told that this particular part of the plan was conceived by Oron Kira himself, and that he had used a similar tactic, quote-unquote, months ago, when he captured his wife Princess Gallia of Onderon. So I want to talk about the quote-unquote part. The story with Princess Gallia, which happened in episode 6 of the podcast, would have been at least 3 years prior to the events of this episode, according to the official continuity. I suppose months ago, quote-unquote, would still technically be accurate, but it'd be a lot of months. The Beast Riders steer their mounts through the open windows of the royal quarters, where Ulic and Alima are currently stationed. Springing forth from her mount, ignited lightsaber in hand, Nomi directs Kay and Kurl Tok to take the guards. She intends to deal with the Sith sorceress herself. Nomi confronts Ulic and tells him, "Quick, get to the wall beasts. We're taking you home." Alima begins to wave her hands and summon deadly apparitions. "By the Sith power, I abjure you. May fear consume you. May your life force shrivel and die." In response to these illusions, Nomi focuses on her Jedi battle meditation. Alima's apparitions are outward aspects of a wave of dark side oppression, anguish, and despair. For her part, Nomi has prepared for this onslaught with weeks of training under the Jedi Masters of Ossus. She resists the mental assault and uses the light side of the Force to completely dispel the dark side apparitions. Alima instantly grabs onto Ulic and asks him to save her from Nomi. Ulic asks Nomi why she came. He reminds her that he told her to stay away. Nomi tells Ulic that she loves him and she wants him to leave with the Jedi. Outside the royal palace, as the Jedi fighters continue their assault on the craft, a mysterious figure strides through the citadel, untouched by neither fire nor shrapnel. Os Wylam, who is flying overhead, senses the figure and realizes that this person is immensely strong in the Force. Wylam has a premonition that he's going to know that Jedi and learn from him. This foreshadowing is a bit chilling when you realize the mysterious figure is none other than Exar Kun. Meanwhile, in the royal quarters, Kay and Nomi try desperately to convince Ulic to return to Ossus with them. Here's what Kay says. "Ulic, you can't conquer the dark side. You're not ready for that kind of stuff. Come on back to Ossus. We'll take the Nebulon Ranger on a voyage, see some of the wild worlds. The galaxy is full of great things to do."
Kay, you sound like a stupid kid.
Nomi asks Ulic at this point if he's ever wondered why Master Arca hasn't appeared to him as a Force ghost. She tells him it's because he turned to the dark side. Arka is calling to him, and he won't listen. Ulic tells the Jedi that they're both crazy. He's here because they're all cowards, not him. Even though Aleema's right beside him, he says to Nomi and Kay that he's not under the power of the dark side. You can see the sweat dripping down his face as the Jedi ignore his request to go away. He's about to lose control. Ignoring all the signs, Nomi moves in and she tells him that his destiny is with his friends, not with the craft.
Nomi, I know what you're doing. You're trying to push me with your battle meditation. I won't have it. I won't have it. I said, back off.
At that point, Ulic holds up the Sith amulet and knocks Nomi back. Kurltok and Kay move in to subdue him. They decide that if he's not going to come willingly, they're going to take Ulic by force. Picking herself up off the ground slowly, Nomi tells them to wait. Wait, listen to me. We're leaving Ulic here. That's when Kay chimes in. What? Leave him here? Are you nuts? Leaving him here will be a death sentence. Kay, you know what the Masters told us. Ulic will come of his own choice or not at all. That is the Jedi way. Kay continues to protest and reaches out to Ulic, who flinches away from him. Nomi tells Ulic that she doesn't regret coming back for him. She's finally learned that some things are not resolved by force, or struggle, or even by love. She now agrees with the Masters that he needs to learn the hard way. Since she's in charge of the mission, she decides they will leave without him. Reluctantly, Kay accepts her decision, but he privately resolves to return to Sinagar himself the first chance he gets. Okay, we have to pause here for a moment and admire Kay's tenacity. I mean, I get that Ulic is his brother, but he has tried so hard to first dissuade him from coming here in the first place, and then try and get him to come back home at least on 2 different occasions, first when he was rescuing Nomi, and now with the Jedi assault force at his back. And still, even after all those times he failed to convince him, he wants to come back again to try and convince him. Back to our story, Ulic tells them that if they leave quickly, none of them will be hurt.
Trust me, I know what I'm doing. My work here will soon be complete.
Nomi turns to him. Yes, Ulic Qel-Droma, you know what you're doing. You're on your own. Be careful. We get the sense that something is over between Nomi and Ulic. A choice has been made, a path taken, and bright possibilities are closed off forever. Aleema tells Ulic that she's glad he picked her over the arrogant Jedi woman. She had already seen through his plan weeks ago and enjoys his company despite the deception. She considers him a worthy adversary and even goes so far as to tell him that she is his destiny. Aleema continues to toy with Ulic. She points out that he destroyed Satal, and who knows, maybe he'll destroy Aleema too. On the other hand, she says, maybe his brother is right and the dark side has already won Ulic over. At this point, the Jedi are gone. They've completely retreated. Ulic and Aleema give in to their dark desires and they begin to kiss. Actually, it's probably more appropriate to say they begin to make out. Just when things are getting kind of interesting for them, another figure appears behind them without warning. Exar Kun steps into the royal chambers, flanked by his 2 Misasi. Ulic instantly pulls away and ignites his lightsaber, while Aleema begins to work her Sith magic.
This must be the Sith pretender Frida Nad warned you about.
Exar Kun laughs and blasts Aleema with a bolt of darkside energy. Pretender? Ha! Frida Nad only taught you the beginnings of Sith power, but I have learned everything. While Aleema is down for the count, the 2 fallen Jedi engage in a fierce lightsaber battle. It becomes quickly apparent that both of them are master swordsmen, and neither can claim an advantage over the other. As Ulic parries Kun's savage thrusts, the Sith amulets begin to glow, their inner workings awakening from a 1,000-year sleep. This is a moment conceived in the long-forgotten time when the Sith were a race of mighty magicians. A time when they were driven to extinction by the Jedi Knights and the armies of the Galactic Republic. These amulets have been constructed to carry a message down through the centuries, a message from the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith. An apparition appears before the 2 fallen Jedi and commands them to cease their fighting. We get no context as to who the Dark Lord is, but we can tell from his armor and headpiece that he is none other than the Sith Lord Marka Ragnos. If you remember, Ragnos was the Dark Lord of the Sith that immediately preceded Ludo Kresh and Nagasato. It was his death that propelled Sato into power. Ragnos tells them that they've been chosen. He reaches out and touches Exar Kun's forehead with his spectral hand.
I now complete your initiation to the dark side so that you may begin to pass the great destiny foretold. Exar Kun, because of you, the Sith will never die. You have rightfully earned the title of Dark Lord of the Sith.
Kuhn's forehead is branded with a Sith sigil. Ragnos then turns to Ulic and grabs his forehead in turn.
Heed these words, Exar Kun. Ulic Qel-Droma will be your first and foremost apprentice. By your free choice, both of you have become part of the grand design. In my time, even as the Galactic Republic battles us to extinction, we now secure the future when the Sith will take their revenge.
Revenge of the Sith. Where have I heard that title before? It's just like George Lucas says. It's like poetry. It rhymes. Okay, so anyways, Alima regains consciousness at the moment that the Sith symbol is branded on Ulic's forehead. She watches in astonishment as the transformation in her lover Ulic is complete. She can feel the dark side energy rolling off of both men as they clasp hands together. Exar Kun is the first to speak. Let it be so, Qel-Droma. The ancient Sith have spoken. Together, we will bring down the galaxy. Then Ulic responds,
Yes, let it be so.
And with that, the curtain drops. That's it, my Padawan learners. The issue and the arc ends in a very, very dark place. But we still have some questions. For instance, how was Ulic's transformation so sudden? Well, I suppose there is precedent in the lore. I know of another Revenge of the Sith story where a certain Anakin Skywalker makes a light switch conversion into a Sith. But who knows? Maybe Ulic is still playing along? You'll have to tune in next time to find out. In our next episode, we begin a new story arc called The Sith War. Listen along as the galaxy descends into chaos and the Sith bring about their revenge. In the immortal words of Darth Vader,
we would be honored if you would join us.